A man dies believing he was a failure. His last request from his deathbed is simple: burn everything I ever wrote, every manuscript, every page, every unfinished sentence. Let it all disappear with me. His best friend takes the papers, looks at the dying man he loves, and makes a decision. He lies, he says yes, and then he betrays him. That betrayal is the only reason you know the name Franz Kafka. One of the greatest writers in human history died convinced his work was worthless. And here is the question that should keep you up tonight. If a mind like that could be so completely wrong about its own worth, what are you wrong about right now about yours? By the end of this video, you will understand the word people use when reality stops making sense, Kafkaesque, where it came from, why a century later it describes your job, your paperwork, your government, and your quietest 3 a.m. thoughts better than any modern word does, and why Kafka's message was never actually despair. It was something much stranger. Stay with me, because the last 5 minutes of this video change the meaning of everything before them. To understand what Kafkaesque means, you first have to understand the machine that built Franz Kafka. And that machine was a man named Hermann. Prague, 1883. Hermann Kafka is everything the world rewards. A self-made businessman who clawed his way up from a poor butcher's family through pure aggression and force of will. Loud, dominant, physically imposing, the kind of man who fills a doorway. He marries an educated woman named Julie, builds a successful business, drags his family into respectable society, and then does what men like him always do. He looks at his firstborn son and expects a mirror. What he gets instead is Franz, small, thin, anxious, sickly. A boy who flinches at loud voices, who lives more inside his head than in any room, who feels everything at 10 times the voltage of a normal person. And Hermann never forgives him for it. Understand what happened in that house, because the whole philosophy is born there. Franz was not beaten into brokenness. It was quieter than that, and quieter is worse. He was measured daily against a standard he could never reach by a man who could never be pleased. His sensitivity was treated as defect. His interests were treated as jokes. His existence was treated as a disappointing rough draft of what a son should have been. There is a specific psychological injury that comes from that, and maybe you know it personally. The injury of being fundamentally unacceptable to the person whose approval was supposed to come free. Years later, Kafka wrote his father a letter, over 100 pages. In it, he tried to explain, one final time, what growing up under him had done. One line from Kafka's writing cuts to the center of it. He described feeling like a guest in his own life, someone with no permission to exist as he was. The letter never reached Hermann. His mother read it and quietly gave it back. Even the confrontation failed. Even the explanation was swallowed by the machine. Remember that detail. It is going to matter. So what does a boy like that do with an inner world that no one wants? He finds a container for it. Franz began to write, not for fame, not for readers. Writing was the one room in his life where his father could not follow. On paper, the anxiety had somewhere to go. The guilt could be given shapes and names. The self-hatred could be examined instead of just endured. But of course, Hermann decided what his son's life would look like. Writing was not a profession. So Kafka was pushed into law, a subject he did not love, at a university he attended to satisfy a man who could not be satisfied. And here, in the middle of this gray obedience, one good thing happened. Maybe the only purely good thing in this entire story. He met Max Brod. Remember that name. Max Brod is the friend from the opening, the one holding the matches at the end. A fellow writer who read Kafka's work and understood immediately what he was looking at, even when Kafka himself could not see it. After university, Kafka enters the world that would end up defining his legacy. The office, first a law office, then an insurance company. Picture his actual days, endless corridors, stacks of claims, forms that reference other forms. Procedures nobody could explain, enforced by people nobody could name, in service of outcomes nobody could see. Long hours, unpaid overtime, a system so vast and circular that no single person inside it understood the whole of it, and the system was not cruel, exactly. It was worse than cruel. It was indifferent. It did not hate him. It simply could not see him. Sound familiar yet? It should. Kafka was describing a Tuesday. Yours, maybe, and here is where this story splits into two lives. By day, a competent, quiet insurance clerk that colleagues found polite and unremarkable. By night, in the hours stolen from sleep, one of the most original minds of the century, writing The Trial, The Castle, America, stories unlike anything that had existed before. And then, this is the part that hurts, finishing almost none of them, abandoning manuscripts mid-sentence, publishing tiny collections that sold almost nothing and went unnoticed. Not because the work was weak, because the voice of Hermann had moved inside his head, and it reviewed everything before the world got a chance to. Not good enough, not worth finishing, not worth showing anyone. Franz Kafka spent his nights writing masterpieces and his mornings deciding they deserved a draw. In 1924, tuberculosis finished what the anxiety had spent decades starting. He was 41. He died in almost total obscurity, a failed writer in his own final accounting, and gave Max Brod that last instruction: burn it all. And Brod, holding the manuscripts of The Trial and The Castle in his hands, chose betrayal over obedience. He spent the following years organizing, editing, and publishing everything. And within a single decade, the anonymous insurance clerk became one of the most important literary and philosophical figures of the 20th century. Sit with the full absurdity of that. A man lived his entire life inside the judgment of one angry father, died believing that judgment, and was wrong. History overruled Hermann, but Franz never got to hear the verdict. He was sitting on some of the most significant writing of his era, and he could not see it because the mirror he was given in childhood was warped, and he never got a chance to look in a different one. And now ask the question this story forces on you. How many Kafkas are alive right now? How many people are walking around this planet with a drawer full of something extraordinary, a voice, a talent, an idea, a self that they have already judged worthless, using a measuring stick handed to them by someone who could not see them? How many people will die never knowing who they would have been in history's eyes, because they only ever consulted their fathers? That question is not about Kafka anymore, and you know it. But here is the twist. The world did not just save Kafka's writing. It found inside that writing a description of something people had always felt and never had a word for, and so his name became the word, Kafkaesque. People throw the word around loosely now. Any long queue, any annoying form, any bad customer service call. But the real thing is far more specific and far more disturbing. To understand it properly, you have to walk through the two nightmares he built. And I need to warn you, both of these stories are going to sound less like fiction and more like a diagnosis. The first is The Trial. A man named Joseph K. wakes up on an ordinary morning in his own bed, and two officials arrest him. For what? They do not say. They do not know. That information is not available at their level. And so begins the most quietly horrifying legal proceeding in literature. K. is never told his crime, ever. He is passed between courts that meet in attics, lawyers who explain nothing, officials who reference higher officials, an infinite staircase of authority where the top floor never arrives. There is always another department, always another procedure, always someone who cannot help you but knows someone who also cannot help you. And watch what the process does to K. This is the true horror of the book, and most people miss it. The system never proves his guilt. It does not have to. K starts doing it himself. He begins organizing his life around the case, rehearsing defenses for an accusation no one has made, feeling guilty without a crime. The verdict does not come from the court. The verdict grows inside him. And at the end, when it is over, having understood nothing, the book delivers its final quiet devastation. K dies still guilty of nothing, of everything, of being accusable at all. Now tell me you have never felt a small version of that. The vague sense of being in trouble without knowing why. Guilt with no crime attached, just floating, looking for a home. An institution, a bank, a government office, an algorithm that flagged you, denied you, suspended you, and could not tell you the reason, because the reason lives in a system where no individual human is actually responsible. That is Kafkaesque, not the inconvenience, the structure. Punishment without accusation, process without meaning, a machine with no operator inside. The second nightmare is even more famous and even more misread, the metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa, a traveling salesman who has spent years as the sole financial support of his parents and sister, wakes up one morning transformed into a giant insect. No explanation, no cause, no cure. It has simply happened, the way disasters simply happen. And here is the detail that tells you everything about Kafka's mind, the detail people always forget. Gregor, waking up as a monstrous insect, does not scream, he does not spiral into existential horror. His first thoughts, lying there on his armored back, with his little legs waving in the air, are about the train schedule. He is late for work. His boss will be angry. How will he explain this to the office? The man has become a bug, and his deepest anxiety is his attendance record. That is not a joke, although it is darkly funny. That is the sharpest observation in the entire story. The system had gotten so deep inside Gregor that it survived the destruction of his humanity. His body changed species overnight. His obligations did not. And then Kafka turns the knife slowly, because the real metamorphosis in the story is not Gregor's, it is his family's. Watch what happens as the weeks pass. As long as Gregor produced, he was loved, or something close enough to it. Now that he cannot work, cannot provide, cannot serve his function, the family's warmth cools. Degree by degree, care becomes duty, duty becomes burden, burden becomes resentment. His sister, who loved him most, is the one who finally says it out loud. We have to get rid of it. Not him anymore, it. And when Gregor quietly dies, alone, in a room they had turned into a storage closet, the family feels something that is worse than grief. They feel relief. They take a day trip. They notice the sister has grown into a pretty young woman. Life, freed of its inconvenient dependent, resumes. There is the question Kafka is really asking, underneath the insect and the absurdity, and it might be the most frightening question in all of literature. Were you ever loved, or were you useful? And if you stopped being useful tomorrow, if you could not work, could not provide, could not perform your function, how long would the warmth last? Do not answer quickly. Gregor thought he knew. So now put the two nightmares side by side, and you can see the full shape of Kafkaesque. In both stories, a completely ordinary person is hit by a sudden, senseless circumstance they did not cause and cannot understand. In both, they respond the only way humans know how, with reason, with effort, with cooperation. They try to work with the system, explain themselves, do everything right, and in both, it does not matter. The absurdity is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a condition. The parameters are senseless. The outcome is fixed, and effort changes nothing. But, and this is the crux, the exact center of Kafka's entire vision, they try anyway. Joseph K. never stops seeking his trial's logic. Gregor never stops trying to be a good son, even inside a body that has made it impossible. Kafka's characters are not heroes because they win. They never win. They are something stranger. They are faithful to the struggle itself, long after the struggle has been proven pointless. And here Kafka stops being a novelist and becomes a philosopher, because what he is really describing is the human condition itself. We are creatures who demand answers, meaning, justice, and resolution, born into a universe that offers none of those things on request. We fight the absurdity, trying to close the gap between what we need reality to be and what it is. And here is Kafka's darkest, most brilliant irony. The fighting is the trap. By trying to resolve the unresolvable, we perpetuate the exact struggle we are trying to end. We interrogate a silence that was never going to answer, and mistake the interrogation for progress. And on some level, and this is the truly unsettling part, we might want it that way, because the struggle for meaning gives us something to do with our existence. The search itself becomes the home. Now Kafka's work is deliberately vague, dreamlike, and open, which means it has nearly as many interpretations as readers. Some read him and conclude we should accept the absurd and stop taking the whole thing so seriously. Some read him and conclude the fight itself is the point, and dignity lives inside doomed resistance. Some conclude that the correct interpretation is that no correct interpretation exists, and that this frustration you feel trying to pin it down is the lesson delivered directly, personally, to you. Only Kafka knew what he meant, and honestly, it is fair to suspect that even he did not. He was not writing arguments, he was tracing the exact shape of a wound. But here is why he matters, and why 100 years later, his name is still the only word we have for a certain feeling. Kafka's story is not unusual. That is the whole secret. A harsh father, a sensitive child, a job that eats a life, talent buried in a drawer, guilt with no crime, anxiety with no source, a family whose love had conditions nobody stated out loud. None of this is rare. It is the most common story on earth. It was just never told with this much honesty before. Kafka is not great because he describes something profoundly unique. He is great because he describes something mundanely universal, so precisely that millions of strangers across a century have read him and felt caught, seen, less alone inside experiences they could never explain to anyone. Every one of us has had at least one Kafkaesque day. He gave that day a name, and that is why his method matters as much as his message. Kafka refused the two great painkillers of literature, false hope and pretty lies. His work does not soothe, it confronts. He distorted reality, insects, endless courts, unreachable castles, precisely so it would map more accurately onto how existence actually feels from the inside. And in doing that, he carved out a strange and permanent gift for the rest of us: permission. Permission to look directly at the darkest, most confusing parts of being alive, without flinching and without decorating them. Unhindered self-examination. A place in the world where honesty, however ugly, is allowed to exist. So let us return, at the end, to that deathbed in 1924, because now you can see what was actually happening in that room. A dying man asks his best friend to burn the evidence of his life, and you might assume the request proves Kafka believed in nothing. But look closer at the life, not the request. This was a man crushed by his father, who kept writing, buried by a bureaucracy, who kept writing, convinced of his own worthlessness, who kept writing, sick, exhausted, unread, unknown, and the manuscripts kept growing. Whatever his mouth said at the end, his hands had spent 40 years voting the other way. That is Kafka's real message, and it was never despair. Despair stops. Kafka never stopped. The message is this: you will not defeat the absurd. You will not get the explanation. The court will not tell you the charge. The castle will not grant the meeting. The universe will not hold the meeting either. And you will continue anyway, not because continuing wins, because continuing is the one move that is yours. The struggle against the senselessness, the refusal to put the pen down, the stubborn insistence on making one honest thing in a dishonest feeling world, that is not the consolation prize of a meaningless life. That is the meaning. It is forged, not found. And one more thing. The story of Franz Kafka contains a warning and a hope, twisted together, and you should leave with both. The warning, the voice in your head that judges your work, your worth, your right to take up space. That voice might be Hermann, somebody else's voice, installed so early you mistook it for your own. Kafka believed that voice, and it cost him his entire life's recognition. He was wrong about himself by the widest margin in literary history. Be very, very careful which verdicts you accept, and the hope. Somewhere in your life there is a Max Brod, or there will be, someone who sees what you cannot see from inside your own warped mirror. When that person tells you your drawer is full of something valuable, consider, just consider, the possibility that they are right and your father was wrong. Because the final irony of this whole story is perfect, and Kafka, of all people, would have appreciated it. The man who ordered his life's work destroyed is immortal, and the father he could never satisfy, the successful one, the strong one, the one whose approval was the measure of everything, Hermann Kafka, is remembered by history for exactly one thing: being Franz Kafka's father. The verdict got overturned. It just came too late for the defendant to hear it. Do not let that be your story. If some part of you has been living inside a trial you were never allowed to understand, leave one word in the comments: continue.